Hello and welcome to the Lobby, GameSpot's weekly hangout every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Pacific, right here on GameSpot.com. I'm your host, Danny Dwyer. Hello to you watching us live and to you watching us on GameSpot.com or YouTube in the future. We had a big old review go up this weekend, Mr. Peter Brown. You spent most of last week playing it 10 out of 10 for Metal Gear Solid 5, The Phantom Pain.
You bet.
Super excited about it?
I'm very excited about it, yeah. I spent like 50 hours playing it last week, and I'm not ready to stop playing it.
Anytime soon. Your review went up on Sunday. Great review, very spoiler-free, which I think a lot of people appreciated.
I had you in mind.
Thank you very much. Yes. And we're going to keep it the same way here today. So we've got an Ask the Reviewer segment. I got a bunch of questions from people via Twitter and the GameSpot comments. And I'm skirting away from story stuff. And you're like going to be the second protection.
Yeah.
So if I ask something that's even skirting a little bit, just round it off and keep it nice and general, okay? Round it off, all right? Before I get into the questions, for those who haven't read the review yet, what are your sort of main takeaways from Phantom Pain? Why a 10 out of 10? What makes it like an outstanding must-play game?
I mean, Metal Gear Solid 5 has a very big legacy behind it, right? So it's both a singular game and a game that fits within the middle of a grand saga that's been going on for almost 30 years now. So the game is on its own, apart from the other games. It is an open-world action game that is filled with so many thoughtful touches, and you can tell there's just like incredible amounts of consideration that went into absolutely everything. Just the simple act of moving feels great. Just looking at the world is rewarding. Like, I mean, every single moment I spent with this game, I found something that struck me with awe. Like, there's just so much to talk about. And then, as a part of the Metal Gear saga, it delivers on so many things that people are hoping for, which is a connection back to the very first game, Metal Gear, that came out in 1987, before the Solid series began on PlayStation.
The MSX games.
The MSX games, yeah.
So I'm a big fan of open world games. I've got a question myself. What's it like exploring this world? Is it a game that's very linear, that you're going from base to base, that you know where you're to go next, or does it feel like an open world that you're discovering elements that you might not have necessarily needed to bump into? There's
a lot of emergent stuff like you're describing. You go about this world, and you have a list of missions that you can choose from, that new ones open up, but you have multiple to choose from, and you can pick one or the other. And even when you pick one, you can fly in by chopper, and there are only certain landing zones. So you have to show up at a certain point on the map and then travel to your base. And when you're doing that, you encounter wildlife that is aggressive, or maybe you view them as a resource that you can capture and send back to Mother Base. That's another really big important aspect of the game. So there's a lot to do beyond just, here's a mission, go for it. I mean, when you're in the world, there are so many things to do that it's easy to forget about what your mission is if you really take in everything and consider all of your options.
Is it surprising to you that it's such a well-crafted open-world game, considering
Totally.
Konami have never done, well, Kojima Productions have never done this before?
No, every single Metal Gear game has been, like missions set in very contained areas with a linear path from one to the next, and it's phenomenal what they've done. I mean, I think you can start with a massive map and throw a character in there and call it open world, and that is the case here in a way, but there are just so many things piled on top of that skeleton of what defines an open world game that I was totally blown away. I mean, this game has been in production for 5 years, and it shows. I mean, there's never a shortage of things to look at or do, and it's incredible.
I'm going to get into the user questions as quickly as possible because we've got a bunch of them here. First one's in from fan of the show, a friend of ours, BC Plasma, asks, is there a reason to explore around in the open world? What kind of collectibles can you get in Metal Gear Solid 5?
So all of the equipment and technology that you unlock and develop in the game happens back at Mother Base, which is an offshore base where you were sort of building a private military. And throughout the open world, you find natural resources, you find wildlife, you find people, of all things. And all of these can be collected and sent back to your Mother Base. So you're incentivized to collect those because all of them go into research and development of new technology, which isn't necessary to beat the game. You can skirt by with almost the bare minimum throughout the whole thing, but you have to be incredibly good in order to do so. So you're incentivized to collect things, to develop new tech, to make your life easier, but it also makes the game much more varied and interesting because some of the tools you unlock are so crazy, and they give you a sense of like wonder and joy, from like this little thing you add to your arm lets you punch the ground that sends out a sonar wave. I mean, so there's plenty to collect, and there's plenty of reasons to collect that stuff.
Excellent. And do you sort of decide what you're upgrading during that. It's not like if you get like 7, if you Fulton 8 goats, you get like some sort of special goat armor.
No, so essentially when you collect enough resources, let's say you collect enough people, right? That levels up a certain part of your base, wherever you place them in a certain field of development. When you hit that level in that field, it then unlocks the ability to craft a thing. But then to actually craft it, you use the natural resources and the money that you earn by completing missions.
It's weird. It actually kind of reminds me of XCOM, where you're like putting people in specific places, and then what you collect out on the field. Translate. That's pretty cool. John Kloss on Twitter asks, I've played all the Metal Gear Solid games except for, is there any important information from one that I should know heading in? So I guess the sort of wider question to that is, can you enjoy this game without having sort of an encyclopedic knowledge of those 4 games, or maybe the MSX ones? And if there was 1 or 2 games that you need to know more about, which ones would they be?
One of the great things about this game, and I think what was really smart of Kojima to do, is to create a story that is interesting enough in its own right, without the connections to games from the past or games set in, in the future in the timeline. A large chunk of the story is dedicated to this specific thing that anybody can get into. I think the cinematography, the voice acting, and the writing are all so good. And like, yes, it's ridiculous. Like the things that happen in this game make no freaking sense. But the emotions that are conveyed in the voice acting and the trauma that these characters endure that you watch sort of culminates into an experience that you can enjoy just on its own. You don't have to really play the other games. But if you have, the sort of last section of the game really does reward all of that dedication. Yeah.
For a series that spent like, almost 3 decades long, did it feel like an incredible ending? Did you want to like immediately grab somebody else who'd play the game and like talk about it?
Oh, absolutely. But I would say that I think a lot of people are expecting that this game will sort of answer very specific questions and tie things up in a really tidy box. But it answers a lot of questions, but at the same time, I mean, do we really want to know everything about these characters? I mean, so much fun about this series is speculating. About their origins, their motivations, their relationships. Kojima must know that, because the ending to this game opens as many new questions as it answers.
Wow.
So yeah,
let's stop it there. And I guess then for people who don't, maybe you said that like obviously the game is enjoyable in its own right. Does the game go to any length to try and like fill in information, like give you a little bit of catch-ups via codex or via like story asides to like remind you what was going on?
Yeah, you collect cassettes in the wild, cassette tapes, and you earn them as rewards for certain mission, and those contain tidbits of the past. The game also gives you a bit of a preamble to let you know what happened like leading up to Ground Zeroes and in Ground Zeroes, which was the prologue to this game. So it does inform you a little bit about the story leading up to it. The stuff that comes afterwards, that is not spelled out so much. There is some of that towards the end of the game where they reveal like sort of the result of the outcome in this, but yeah, it doesn't. It's not like you have a huge compendium of information to like sort through.
Which I guess you also never really had in the old games either. There was an element of like going online and trying to figure bits and bobs out.
I mean, yes, Metal Gear Solid 4 had this like incredibly large optional database of information to install that is an encyclopedia for the series, more or less. So yeah, I mean, no game in the series has really gone to the lengths to tell the entire saga, but I think this does a good job for people who are curious. There is stuff to dig your teeth into.
Cool. Next one up, Daniel Noss, DNOS Skywar on Twitter asks, have you tried the PC version? Any chance of another Arkham Knight type scandal? What version did you play? How long did you play? Did you play the PC version?
No.
So who knows?
No, I played the PlayStation 4 version for just about 50 hours. And the game holds up incredibly well, technically. One thing I did notice, it has really great draw distances, and you sort of land in a huge environment, and you really do appreciate, like, wow, like I can see so far into the distance, and things look great. While you don't see Poppin in the distance on the PS4 version, you do see some in the foreground. But I think the fact that you have so much to gawk at that's larger and more impressive, that sort of distracts you from the little blade of grass like a foot ahead of you that maybe didn't pop up yet.
Yeah.
And I think it's a good trade-off. But speaking of the PC version, if you look at Ground Zeroes, that game is phenomenal on PC. It just looks, I mean, the console versions look wonderful anyway. The PC version is just amazing. And this is done in the same engine. It's, for all intents and purposes, the same, build of a game, in a way.
Yeah.
So I would expect the PC version to be great. I haven't tried it yet. but that's what I expect.
Cool. Will you be trying it next week when it comes out? I know we're
Yeah.
at PAX on when the game comes out, or we're
Not
just getting
me.
back from it. Oh, you're not going?
I'm not going to PAX.
Just
no.
sticking around playing more Metal Gear Solid?
Actually, yes.
Son of a
Sorta.
bitch. Son of a bitch. Kate Onder asks via Twitter, how hard was Metal Gear Solid 5? Moderate difficulty, too hard at points? Was there any parts where you found it difficult? Or?
There are absolute difficult points. Towards the end of the game, especially, and this is one of the issues, this is probably the only issue I had with the game, is that as you approach the end of the story, normally you beat a story mission, you unlock a new story mission, that natural progression. But what happens at the end of the game is the game forces you to play older missions at extreme difficulty.
Oh, wow.
And you have to do that in order to unlock new ones. In my mind, that's to pass the time. It does sort of throw off your sense of progression in a timeline because you're like, I did that, 20 hours ago.
Yeah.
It doesn't fit in the story if I'm trying to do that again.
Is it more difficult because
The
there are more
point is it's
people
more
there?
difficult. No, because it's like total stealth. Like the moment the enemy is alerted, you
right.
fail the mission. Or you have no equipment. Like you basically go in
Oh, so
barehanded.
it's like arbitrary sort of
Yeah.
versions of the... Yeah. Okay.
Some of those you can cheese. Like you do gain the ability to call in air raids. Those cost resources, and it lowers your ability to reach a certain level of rank.
Right.
But yeah, if the going gets tough, you do have tools at your disposal. Be it that, or one of the buddies you can take with you makes life much easier. So the game is hard, but it gives you the options to make it easier on yourself if you simply just want to beat it and continue.
Cool. A couple more questions here. Vova asks, does the open world nature of the gameplay translate to or impact the story? So I guess the sort of take from that would be, do these feel like isolated missions you're kind of walking to and from? Does the choices you make in the open world bleed into the story at all? Like, can you do like only this mission and it changes the story somewhat?
What I think the open world does for this game, which I don't know if this is answering this question specifically, but it gives you a lot of time to spend with Big Boss. And as you sort of feel a connection to the events he's going through, that ends up being a lot of time with yourself and your own thoughts. And if you consider that he is the main character, and this is a story surrounding him, the fact that you have the time to reflect on what he's going through, where he is, and what he's doing, to me lends a good connection between the open world and the story missions. Because if this was just a story and the gameplay was just there to support it, it would be more or less a movie. But this game is unlike some people pointed at Metal Gear Solid 4 and they were like, oh, there's like 20 hours of cutscenes. Like this, the gameplay stuff is almost secondary. Here, this really is about being in the world that exists as the character. And so I think that the open world is actually a great stage for Big Boss and thus the story at large.
Yeah. Another great aspect of this series, of course, is the sort of the cinematic quality of its presentation, and certainly the cutscenes, especially in, well, I guess the whole series going through, like Metal Gear Solid 1 was known for it, 4 was pretty incredible. How does 5 stack up in terms of that aspect of it? Are we looking at 15, 20-minute long cutscenes that could have been shorter, or does it feel like it's been well directed and edited?
There are cutscenes that you may say are 15 minutes roughly, but those come at certain beats when you've been struggling really hard to accomplish something and get to a point in the story, and those are a reward in a big way because you are fighting to understand what is happening next. And considering the high quality of the framing composition, the voice acting, the lighting, I mean, even just down to the art style, like these cutscenes are great. And there are a bunch of them, but you spend the majority of your time playing this game rather than watching it.
Cool. Last question, I think. Well, one or two more maybe. First one, this one's sort of an amalgamation of a bunch of questions people have asked.
Yeah.
Devin Hall asks, where do you see the series going post Kojima, if at all? Where will we go for our acronyms and movie chat? Does this feel like the last Metal Gear game from what you played? Like, regardless of story, right, or without maybe tipping on the story, does it feel like this is wrapped up and we'll have Kojima making different games from now on?
I do not believe Kojima will be making another Metal Gear game. I don't see how that's going to happen, given the politics at Konami and given the place in the story, and honestly, the scope and scale of this game. It's the amount of work that's gone into this is immediately apparent, and it never fails to remind you of the fact that this is his opus. This is like an amazing body of work, and I don't think we'll ever see a game like this from Kojima in the Metal Gear universe ever again.
Last question, no spoilers. Do you feel ashamed of your words and deeds?
Of my words and deeds.
Remember the tweet Kojima said about quiet?
Oh.
Without getting into it.
Okay, there's justification in the story, but it wasn't necessary.
Okay, all right, fair enough. Peter Brown, thank you so much for coming on. Metal Gear Solid 5, The Phantom Pain. Review up on GameSpot.com right now if you want to check it out. Go over there and let us know what you think in the comments below.